Hello and welcome to this video on some instructions for your first writing assignment. So what I want to do is just quickly go over mostly the guidelines and what I mean by the 10 guidelines that you have written below the prompt here. So the prompt is, how does Descartes stumble upon the I, that is the self? And so that's the kind of more general big question that you're answering in the whole paper. Remember, it is 3 to 4 pages, typed double spaced. The sub questions are helping you answer that larger question, I mean. And so as long as you are answering each sub question, then you will be addressing that larger question. So the first one is, what is Descartes' project? In other words, what is he trying to do? What is he trying to accomplish? And that's basically what is he trying to accomplish in the whole Meditations. Second one is, what are the methods of doubt that Descartes uses? And then also, what is he trying to doubt? Remember that the methods of doubt is the way that he doubts. And then what is he trying to doubt is something more specific. Third one is, what role does thinking play in establishing the existence of the I? So once he does prove that that I exists, the question is, what role does thinking play into it? Or what does thinking have to do with it? And then the next one is, how is the I am, I exist an epistemic and a metaphysical claim? So you'll have to go back and review from previous videos what epistemic and metaphysical means, and how this ends up being both an epistemic as well as a metaphysical claim. And then the last thing you're doing is, how does he define the I? So he's pretty explicit about that definition in the second meditation, and that is also covered in the videos. So let's look at the rules. This is the important part here, because remember, I will be using these rules as a rubric for grading your assignment. So let's take number one. What do I mean by brainstorming? Basically, this means that you're answering the whole question before you even begin to write or type. And that means that you sit down and write out the answer to those specific questions, and you think about that answer overall before you write the paper. This is so that you have a very general plan for the paper, and also to make sure that you're covering each part. Number two is something that you shouldn't worry too much about unless you don't understand what the questions are being asked. But rewriting everything that I'm asking in your own words would be a helpful way to help you better understand exactly what is being asked. Number three, get to the point right away. By this I mean you should start answering the question right away. No long introductions are needed, so you don't need to go into detail about who Descartes was, what time period he lived in, what other philosophical books he published, or anything like that. You're basically just addressing the question right away. In this case, you have the sub questions that you can start just with the first one, go to the second one and third one, and so on and so forth. Number four, organize ideas. Use paragraphs as unit of meanings. Number one is related. I'm sorry, that's number four. Number four is organize ideas is related to number one, and that's because when you are organizing your ideas, you should have already answered all the parts, right? You should have already answered the questions before you started writing. With number four, you're kind of thinking about how those parts are going to be put into paragraph form. So if you for example, if you decide to have a paragraph on, let's say, the third bullet point, what role does thinking play in establishing the existence of the I? That's a whole paragraph. Basically, you want to organize that paragraph, and you want to put it, in the middle or wherever you're going to fit it. But this is something that you should already have done when you're answering the questions for number one. But it is a good idea to basically think about your paragraphs as wholes, as a whole within each paragraph, but also where those paragraphs are going to go in relation to your paper as a whole. So the first paragraph, for example, should address Descartes' project, right? And that's because you are answering the question right away, right? And that's what number 3 requires. And so, that's the first paragraph. You decide on what the second paragraph and third paragraph will be, and somewhere along the fourth or fifth paragraph, you're going to be uh, writing about the role that thinking plays. So basically, my point here is when you're organizing your ideas, you're looking at your paper as a whole and you're making those decisions as to what paragraph is going to go where and then what each one of those paragraphs is going to cover. That's the idea behind organizing your ideas and by using paragraphs. And you can see how tied to number one or how closely related that is to number one. Number 5, transition. Usually this is done at the end of the paragraph, but it could also be done at the beginning of a paragraph. And you should transition wherever possible. It's okay to use the first person I. So you can write something like, now that I have explained Descartes, how Descartes uses thinking to prove the existence of the I will now go and explain how the I exist is an epistemic metaphysical claim. So what I'm saying here is if you have a paragraph for the role that thinking plays in establishing the I, and then you have another paragraph for how the I exist is an epistemic and metaphysical claim. If you had a paragraph for each one of those, a transition sentence between those two would be something along those lines. Now that I have shown how thinking plays into the establishment of the existence of the I will now show how the I exist is a metaphysical and epistemic claim. You can do that explicitly, and that is a transition sentence because you're in a sentence. You're saying that you did something in the previous paragraph, and now you're going to do something else in the next paragraph. That's exactly what an explicit transition sentence looks like. Transition sentences are important because they're kind of a bridge between the paragraphs, and it shows that your whole paper is organized, and there's a kind of a line of thinking or a trend of thought throughout the whole paper. Number 6, use your own examples wherever possible. So by this I mean very concrete examples from your own experiences about some of the concepts that are covered in the I in the meditations in this case. So for example, if you're talking about the methods of doubt and you want to show that sense perception is one of the methods, you're writing that sense doubting everything from sense perception is a method. You might want to give an example, a concrete example of what it means to believe something due to the senses. So for example, I believe that chocolate tastes like this or that because I've tasted it. That's a sense experience I've had. Those are concrete. That is an example of a concrete example. So you want as many concrete examples as you can, because concrete examples at the end of the day are really going to show that you know what you're talking about. Number 7, the first paragraph should in some way structure the whole paper. So I said earlier there are no introductions, but basically the first paragraph should be an introduction in the relevant sense. You're kind of giving, in the first paragraph you should kind of give an abstract of the whole paper, and that again is related to number 1, but it's also related to number 4, and that's because you kind of want to give us an abstract of the whole paper, but it's basically just foreshadowing the specifics of what you're going to do and you're going to cover in the rest of the paper. That still means that you are focusing on the question right away. It doesn't mean that you're not. It's just that you're kind of you have a relevant introduction if you show that your writing for the rest of the paper is organized, and that's one of the main functions of the first paragraph. And then number 8, don't include anything that's irrelevant. So there are a lot of things that we've talked about when it comes to Descartes. We talked about how he lived during the scientific revolution, but that's not really relevant to this paper. So don't go off on tangents that we've discussed that you might find interesting but are not really answering the question. The example of the scientific revolution is a good one. I talked quite a bit about how the scientific revolution influenced some of Descartes' thinking, but it just doesn't really address what we're being asked here. And then number 9, address all parts of the prompt. So in this case, you got to make sure that you cover all 5 of the bullet points. As long as you cover all 5 of those very thoroughly and very explicitly, then that 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 addresses number 9. It basically means that you don't leave anything out, and in this case, anything that was asked. You don't leave anything that was asked out. Number 10, pay attention to word choice. Wrong choice of words may look like you don't know what you're talking about. So be very careful when you use the words like epistemic or metaphysical. You are addressing how the I am, I exist is an epistemic as well as a metaphysical claim. And so you want to be very careful to use those words with what they, in terms of what they mean, because if you use them in the wrong way, so the word metaphysical, for example, can potentially be used in the wrong way. And if you do that, then it kind of shows that you don't really know what the word means. And so you want to avoid anything that shows that you don't know what you're talking about in terms of the meaning of the words. And that's what I mean in number 10. Pay very close attention to how you're using the words, because in this case, in philosophy, how words are used basically means how well you understand the concepts.